Bienvenido a los Desayunos Informativos de Europa Press.
Arranca una nueva edición de los Desayunos Informativos de Europa Press, una cita que llega a tus oídos gracias al apoyo de Imperial Brands, Endesa, Fujitsu, Ibercaja, KPMG, Moeve, Telefónica y Veolia. En esta ocasión, nuestra tribuna informativa ha contado con la participación de Michael McGrath, comisario europeo de Democracia, Justicia, Estado de Derecho y Protección de los consumidores, quien ha compartido su visión sobre los principales retos institucionales y regulatorios que afronta actualmente la Unión Europea. Tras su intervención inicial, el comisario europeo ha mantenido un coloquio con el director de Europa Press, Javier García Vila, quien ha trasladado algunas de las preguntas formuladas por los asistentes a este encuentro. La bienvenida institucional y apertura del acto han sido realizadas por el presidente ejecutivo de Europa Press, Asís Martín de Cabiedes.
Y bienvenidas todos, todas, a los desayunos informativos de Europa Press, que esta mañana contamos, y es un honor contar con el comisario de Democracia, Justicia, Estado de Derecho y Protección de los Consumidores de la Comisión Europea, el señor Michael McGrath. Well, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for being with us this morning. May I introduce you to the audience, if I may? Michael McGrath is an Irish politician with over 20 years of experience in public service at local, national, and European level. He currently serves as the European Union Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law, and Consumer Protection. A qualified chartered accountant with first-class honors degree in commerce from University College Cork, he brings a strong background in economic and financial policy to his European role. From years 2022 to year 2024, Mr. McGrath was Ireland's Minister for Finance, responsible for managing the Irish economy and public finances. In this role, he represented Ireland in the Eurogroup and in the ECOFIN, and served as governor institutions such as IMF, the World Bank, and the European Investment Bank. Under his tenure, Ireland recorded a strong economic performance, reduced its national debt, and achieved a significant budget plus. Between years 20 and 22, he served as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, overseeing annual public spending of more than 100 billion, the government digital agenda, and the National Capital Investment Programme. He played a central role in the fiscal response for the COVID-19 pandemic and to the economic impacts of the Brexit. Am I right? Yes. Mr. McGrath has been member of the Irish Parliament since year 2007 for the constituency of Cork South Central. He served as Fianna Fáil's lead spokesman on finance from year 2011 to year 2020 and was a member of several important parliamentary committees. Early in his career, he served in local government on Passage West Town Council and Cork Council, giving his direct experience of local administration and community representation. Before entering national politics, he worked in the private and higher education sectors as chartered accountant with KPMG, who happens to be a sponsor of this event. That's a coincidence. And also of Cork's Red FM as Head of Management Information Systems at University College Cork. Across his career, Michael McGrath has built a reputation as a consensus builder, an effective communicator. I hope today you will keep that standard up. And as a committed European focus on fiscal stability, sustainable growth, and the real-life impact of public policy on citizens and business. As I said before, Mr. McGrath, honestly, it's a great honor and a great pleasure to have you with us. And please the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, Asís Martín de Cabiedes, for that very comprehensive introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all this morning at this working press event hosted by Europa Press. And thank you for organising this event, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you this morning. It's a great honour, and it is a real pleasure to be here in Madrid, in Spain, a country that plays such a central role in shaping Europe's economic and democratic future. And I'm particularly grateful to Europa Press for bringing together such a broad and interesting audience. Moments like this matter because in a time of rapid change, open exchanges between public authorities, media, business and civil society are essential to keep our policies grounded and to ensure that our democracies remain strong. I speak to you today at what is a moment of profound geopolitical instability and economic volatility. Across the world today, fault lines have emerged. Global economic competition and even confrontation is intensifying, with dependencies being exploited and supply chains of critical goods and materials being weaponized. And Europe's strengths are being put under pressure. Meanwhile, the digital transition is revolutionizing economies, is redefining industries, and testing the limits of long-standing rules and safeguards. Europe finds itself navigating these dramatic changes at a time of war on our continent, instability in our neighbourhood, and a renewed contest between open societies and authoritarian systems. In such a landscape, I believe that Europe's response to these challenges has to be based on a key strength. In many ways, it is our main strength, and that is our founding values. For decades, the European Union has not only shown that it maintains peace, but that it is the rule of law that provides stability. It is democracy that builds trust, and it is open economies based on stability and trust that drive innovation, competitiveness and growth. Even in a time of geopolitical upheaval and economic turbulence, this is not something that we take for granted. It is actually something that we must actively protect and reinforce. And this morning I would like to present 4 ways under my mandate as Commissioner in which the Commission is doing so. The first is by reaffirming the bedrock of our Union, which is the rule of law. Trust is not a soft value. In today's unstable geopolitical context, it is in fact Europe's competitive edge. This trust is being fostered by Europe's strong rule of law culture, perhaps our most undervalued economic asset. Conversely, when the rule of law is weakened, when rules become arbitrary, enforcement becomes unpredictable, or legal certainty gives way to political interference, the economic cost is not theoretical, it is immediate. Capital flows elsewhere, investment shrinks, innovation slows, and brains drain. This is why strengthening the rule of law is not only a legal or a values-based imperative, but actually a strategic investment in Europe's future stability and prosperity. And this is why we are intensifying our work to safeguard legal certainty so that businesses, both large and small, can count on stability, consistently and clarity across all 27 member states of our Union. Our commitment was made clear last year when the Commission added a single market dimension for the first time to the annual Rule of Law report, demonstrating its economic added value. In a world of volatility and uncertainty in which we live today, Europe will continue to be the place where there is a market confidence through guaranteeing stability, offering trust and fostering ambition and innovation. And it is on that basis that we are fostering ambition and innovation that I would now like to turn. For Europe to harness this competitive edge at a global scale, We must finally remove the internal fragmentation that limits activity across our fantastic single market. On paper, Europe is the largest integrated market in the world. But in practice, I think we all know that its full potential today remains untapped. Today's founders and investors are now faced with 27 national legal systems and more than 60 company forms. For too long, this regulatory fragmentation and unnecessary burdens, along with their corresponding costs, have discouraged Europe's talent, ambition, and innovation from setting up, scaling up, and staying in Europe. Last year in Spain, more than 100,000 new companies were created, but the question is how many of them will go beyond operating locally and truly scale across the EU single market and indeed go on to become significant global players in their particular field. Hopefully many of them, but unfortunately probably not as many as we would like, in part because of the fragmentation of our single market at this point in time. And the truth is that this is also the case across the member states of the European Union. So to make the single market an incubator for startups and scale-ups, the Commission has proposed EU Inc., one corporate legal framework that will cover all 27 member states of our Union. This proposal was designed around what founders and investors have told us consistently what they need: speed, predictability and digital simplicity. And this is why the EU Inc. proposal offers an optional, harmonised corporate legal framework with a recognisable EU brand. A framework that responds to the needs of innovative companies but remains open to all founders. And a single corporate rulebook for the entire life cycle of companies in the single market. In our proposal, there are four main ways that EU Inc. is designed to make all the difference. First, EU Inc. is designed to be faster and cheaper to set up and scale up. Faster means that you can register an EU Inc. company once the legal process of passing the legislation has been concluded. You can set it up online within 48 hours. Cheaper means for no more than €100 and with no minimum share capital. Second, EU Inc. is designed to be digital by default, not only at incorporation, but actually right the way through the company's life cycle, from fully digital share transfers to insolvency procedures that you hope will never have to happen. In addition, companies will submit information once only, and business registers will share this information further. We know it has been a common complaint by businesses in the EU that they have to repeatedly share the same information with different national authorities in the member state of their incorporation, and then when they are seeking to grow and expand throughout the EU, they have to do the same thing again in all of the other countries. EU Inc. companies will be able to make use of the tools of today: the multilingual and digital EU company certificate and the EU power of attorney. I am notably thinking of the upcoming European business wallet. Third, EU Inc. is designed for talent. EU Inc. companies will better compete for, incentivise, but also critically retain talent through a harmonised employee stock option scheme. We call it EU ESOP. And through taxation on income once shares are sold. So we're proposing to harmonise the timing of when the taxation liability would arise in the context of these new employee stock option plans. Fourth, EU Inc. is designed for investment. We know that investment is the oxygen without which businesses cannot grow and thrive. Investment procedures will also be fully digital, without mandatory involvement of intermediaries for share subscriptions and share transfers. And this way, EU Inc. companies will have better access to early stage investments and venture capital and to raising equity across borders throughout their growth cycle. This framework responds specifically to the needs of innovative companies, but will be available to all founders who wish to use it. The predictability it brings is underpinned by legal certainty. It understands that investment can help to reward risk. It provides trust and fosters confidence and certainty, clarity and predictability from Europe's competitive advantage in a context of geopolitical instability and no little economic volatility. Trust is not only about the relationship between regulators and companies, ladies and gentlemen. It is about people. It is about whether citizens feel protected, respected, and treated fairly in the digital marketplace, which is all around us. It's omnipresent in this day and age. Consumer trust is not a soft concept. It is the foundation of a functioning market, and without it, we know that people disengage, and when people disengage, the market simply fails. But digital disruption is reshaping consumer behaviour and market dynamics at an unprecedented pace. New platforms, intermediaries, and targeting techniques, some fair, some manipulative, are testing the limits of our existing frameworks. One thing is clear. What is illegal offline must be illegal online. And this is why the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has tasked me with bringing forward a Digital Fairness Act later on this year to enhance the EU's digital rulebook. This act will, in a targeted way, fill any remaining gaps that expose consumers to those risks and harms. It will address, for example, how addictive designs incentivize users to stay online or spend more, dark patterns that unfairly influence consumer decisions, influencer marketing gives rise to problematic commercial practices, and personalization practices can see user data used to exploit rather than to serve them. In this context, children deserve our particular attention and protection. For generations, specific standards of accountability, responsibility and care have protected children from risks and harms offline, and we now need to do the same in the online environment. For this generation of digital natives and for each and every one to come. This is not a European issue. It is a global epidemic. And this is why discussions about social media bans are held among member states and around the world, and why President von der Leyen has convened a panel of experts on the use of social media by minors. And I'm aware that these matters are also very high on the agenda here in Spain. When consumers trust the products and services that they are buying, they engage more in the market. Businesses benefit, and we know that markets flourish. And with the single largest consumer market in the world and a consumer economy accounting for 51% of its GDP, the EU has shown how stable consumer protection is not a burden, but a competitive edge and can be an engine for growth. Ladies and gentlemen, all I have outlined so far rests on one of the EU's foundations, democracy, and the open, free and pluralistic societies that democracies make possible. But our European democracies are facing generational challenges too. Authoritarian trends, as well as hybrid wars, unaccountable algorithms amplifying information, manipulation and disinformation, and disillusion, leading to apathy and to disengagement. Citizens question the gaps between what politicians promise and what they actually deliver. This disconnect creates fertile ground for information manipulation, disinformation, and for views that reject democracy entirely. The threats and challenges facing our democracies are severe and are interconnected, and facing them requires a concerted and a united response. The threats and challenges facing our democracies will not go away. This is why the European Democracy Shield that the European Commission presented in November last year is not only about protecting our democracies, but also about strengthening them, because we cannot be complacent. We must continue to nurture and invest in our democracy. The Democracy Shield marks our shift towards a strategic framework of action that will combat ecosystems of foreign information, manipulation, interference and disinformation, that will tackle opaque algorithms that amplify rage over reason and legitimate debate, that safeguard the integrity of electoral processes and will confront the challenges to media independence and viability, and will respond to the pressure on civil society and public participation. In an era where information manipulation is used as a geopolitical weapon, or where information ecosystems siphon citizens into silos, Defending democracy is about defending the very stability of our free, open and pluralistic societies across Europe and the trust that binds citizens with their representatives, businesses and institutions together. And this is why, through the European Democracy Shield, the Commission is doubling down on democracy as the guarantor of transparency, accountability and trust. Ladies and gentlemen, when you bring all of these initiatives together, they do not represent isolated efforts, but a coherent agenda, I hope you will agree, for Europe's future. Clarity, confidence and competitiveness based on certainty, stability and critically based on trust. This is the Europe that we are forging at a time of economic uncertainty and significant geopolitical volatility. A legal environment where rules are stable, where enforcement is predictable, and where the rule of law is non-negotiable. A vast, integrated single market that provides businesses with the confidence to set up, to scale up, succeed and stay across each and every member state. A digital economy where fairness, transparency and consumer empowerment drive ambition and innovation, and where children are as protected online as they are offline. And finally, a union of transparent and accountable democracies that support our free, open and pluralistic societies that we are privileged to enjoy within the European Union. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to set out those opening remarks, and I very much look forward, Javier, to our discussion and thank you once again.
Gracias, comisario. Muchas gracias por su intervención. Le decía que tenemos poco tiempo y muchos asuntos. Quiero profundizar en algunos de los anuncios que nos ha hecho en su intervención y ya le digo que vamos a hablar bastante de España, comisario, y de la situación de nuestro país. Pero antes de nada, permítame, estas medidas que ha anunciado para evitar la fragmentación de los mercados con la posibilidad de constituir empresas en 48 horas, ¿cuándo van a ser efectivas? ¿Cuándo un empresario europeo se va a poder constituir en cualquier país en 48 horas?
Well, thank you, Javier. So we are at a point now where we have published the legislative proposal for EU Inc. And I want to thank all of those, including here in Spain, who contributed to the public consultation and to the development of this groundbreaking initiative. So we now expect the co-legislators, being the members of the European Parliament and the member states, to swiftly, we hope, agree on their negotiating positions, and then they will get into the interinstitutional negotiations, or the trilogues, as we call them in EU parlance. The European Council has set the ambition for us to facilitate agreement between the co-legislators by the end of this year. There will, of course, then be a further lead-in period. You need to have the official publication in the EU Journal. The legislative file will have to come into force and then ultimately into application. So the first priority is to reach the political agreement between the co-legislators. And I do believe that what is different now, because this has been attempted in the past, but what is different now, I believe, is that the political will is there to achieve this. We have the diagnosis from the Draghi report and the Letter report. We know that the fragmentation, as I said in my remarks, of the EU single market is holding us back. It is preventing many companies from reaching a global scale while based in Europe. Too many of them are simply leaving the EU when they become successful, or as they plan to become successful. So fundamentally, EU Inc. is about helping to make it easier to establish a company within the European Union and make it easier for it to scale up with Europe as its base, and also make it more attractive to attract and retain talent, as well as being a vehicle for the essential lifeblood of business, which is capital and investment. So we're really looking forward to these negotiations. This is our moment. We must seize the opportunity. I think that founders and innovators deserve no less. We have to break down all of the barriers in the single market. And if I may make one final point on this, it is that for EU Inc. to reach its full potential, all of the other reforms that we have spoken about, the further integration of the single market, the Savings and Investments Union, the integration of our energy market, of our telecoms market, all of that must continue in tandem. Otherwise, we will not achieve the full potential of EU Inc. Because while EU Inc. resolves the patchwork quilt that we have in EU corporate law, it won't resolve all of the other issues that companies have to encounter, including as simple as setting up a bank account in another member state. So all of the other reforms must continue in parallel. If they do, and we get EU Inc. over the line, and I'm confident that we will, then I think it can make a real difference and it can be transformative to the European economy.
Gracias, comisario. Vamos a ir con algunas cosas concretas, pero antes permítame una reflexión general. Usted acaba de venir de un viaje a los Estados Unidos. Cuéntenos un poco qué impresiones se ha traído. Se lo digo porque obviamente estos 2 años, este año y medio que llevamos de gobierno de Trump ha supuesto una sacudida tremenda en las relaciones internacionales y especialmente en las relaciones entre los Estados Unidos y Europa. ¿Qué impresión se ha traído de los Estados Unidos?
Yeah, we had a very intense visit last week to the state of California. It was spent in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. We had a number of priorities for our visit, in particular engaging on consumer protection, data protection, the protection of children online, but also telling the real story of EU policy and the real story of the EU's approach to regulation, which is a balanced approach. And in the same way that European companies trading in the United States have to respect and comply with the rule book that applies in the US, and similarly, European companies, American companies, Chinese companies trading within the European Union have to respect our rule book, including our digital rule book. So that was an important message that I wanted to convey to all of the interlocutors, and including during a number of media engagements that I had. So we met with some of the world's biggest companies, and they are very clear that they want to have a close, cordial working relationship and an enduring partnership between the European Union and the United States, because let's not forget, the EU's single market of 450 million people is an extraordinarily valuable market for these companies to be trading in. Yes, of course, we engaged on the approach of EU regulation. They want to have certainty and consistency and predictability about the EU digital rule book. I was able to explain the significant efforts that we are making in relation to simplification and seeking to ease the burden of regulation while not engaging in deregulation itself. We met with a number of public authorities on the data protection side and on the consumer protection side. And as you know, the state of California is very progressive in these areas and actually has an agenda which in many respects is quite common to our own. But our engagement with the US continues at all levels, at state level, at federal level. We have had difficult moments in the last year and a half or so. We are working our way through them. We are focused on implementing our side of the arrangement, the agreement that was entered into in respect of the joint statement agreed last summer in the context of the trading relationship. It's a trading relationship that's worth 1.6 trillion euro every single year. So I took the opportunity in the United States to highlight, for example, one of the foundations of that trading relationship, which is the EU-US data privacy framework that provides the basis of the international data flows and safe data flows between companies and between public authorities on both sides of the Atlantic is what makes all of this work. So again, highlighting the importance of the safeguards that are required to be in place in the US remaining in place as a prerequisite to retention of this data privacy framework was something that I was also able to highlight.
Comisario, otro de los asuntos de los que nos ha hablado es de su compromiso de presentar antes de final de año un plan de equidad digital. ¿Nos puede avanzar? ¿Qué medidas concretas va a proponer?
Yeah, so we are at this very moment preparing the Digital Fairness Act. It is an act that will be designed to address any remaining gaps in the area of consumer protection online. And I do want to acknowledge the active engagement of the Spanish authorities in this endeavour, because it is a significant initiative. We have reassured the business community it is not about placing a layer on top of another layer. It is not about bringing about further overlapping of regulation. It actually provides an opportunity for some simplification, but also an opportunity for us to make sure that our rule book for consumer protection online is sufficiently concrete, that it is clear and that we can apply it consistently. Because when we talk about issues like dark patterns and addictive design and unfair personalization and the role of social media influencers and the difficulty we've all encountered in ending online subscriptions that we may have signed up to even on a trial basis, we hear from the national authorities that sometimes the law that we currently have on these matters is not clear enough, and it doesn't give them the confidence to initiate action in respect of complaints that they may have received from consumers. And so it is designed to close those remaining gaps to help better protect consumers in the online environment. One example, Javier, is the fact that we have a Digital Services Act, which is not a consumer protection instrument in itself, but which does contain at some level of depth, though not very deep, certain consumer protection measures, but only in respect of the platforms that are within its scope, the really big ones. But everybody else is outside of the scope of the DSA and are not really covered in respect of many of these issues. So we're currently preparing the impact assessment. I'll be meeting my team on a number of occasions, I expect, in the coming weeks, because we have to finalise it in advance of an appearance before the Regulatory Scrutiny Board of the European Union in July. And then the ambition is to present the Digital Fairness Act before the end of this year, again then with the negotiations taking place next year.
Sí. Y, comisario, en una última cosa respecto a sus atribuciones, y ahora nos metemos ya en la actualidad española, pero sí que quería saber, porque en noviembre se presentó el escudo democrático. En estos meses transcurridos, todavía pocos, ¿hay ya alguna conclusión de cómo está funcionando?
Thank you very much, Javier. So we have moved very quickly since the Commission adopted the Democracy Shield back in November. I want to acknowledge Simona Constantin of my team, who led on the work within my cabinet. I'm delighted to be joined by Ana Gallego, who is the Director General of DG Just and who is leading on this visit. And I'll answer your question now, but also can I thank the Commission representation team here in Madrid, Irina and the whole team, for all of the work that they have done in supporting us on this visit as well. So we move very quickly to set up the flagship measure under the Democracy Shield, which is this new Centre for Democratic Resilience, which is not reinventing the wheel. It's not repeating anything that's already there. It's not placing another layer on top of an existing layer. It endeavours to act as a hub to better coordinate a lot of the good work that is already happening, including by the External Action Service of the European Union. You'll be familiar with their rapid alert system. We know that many national governments and national authorities are doing considerable work in the area of foreign information manipulation and disinformation and interference. There's a lot of monitoring and detecting and reporting going on, but it's not always pulled together in a cohesive way. So we are seeking to collate the overall picture so that we have a full understanding of what is happening throughout the European Union and ultimately in our neighbourhood as well, among the countries that aspire to becoming part of the European family. But it's about much more than so-called FEMI. It is also about supporting our citizens through investment in digital literacy and media literacy. It's about ensuring that we cooperate more at an electoral authority level We have a European cooperation network on elections. The Spanish authorities are particularly active in relation to that network as well, where best practice and information is shared, and the authorities are there to help one another because the challenges are quite similar. Information interference and manipulation and the spread of disinformation, it doesn't stop at any border between member states of the EU or indeed between the EU itself and its external border. You know, we have seen the extraordinary attempts at Russian interference in Moldova, for example. We know that elections within the European Union have been the subject of interference, and it would be easy to dismiss all of this as not being real or not happening, and I hear those voices all the time, but the evidence is there in black and white. This is a real threat, and we know what the motivation is of those who seek to interfere in our elections. It is to undermine trust in our democratic institutions, in our politics, and ultimately in democracy itself, and we simply cannot allow that to continue.
Bueno, comisario, España sigue sin cumplir las recomendaciones de la Comisión Europea respecto a cambios en el sistema de elección del órgano de los jueces, del Consejo General del Poder Judicial. ¿Qué le parece a usted esto? ¿Esto compromete de alguna forma la independencia judicial en España?
So the first point to make is that, as with all other member states, we set out our overall analysis and evaluation of the rule of law situation in the annual rule of law report. And so the last report, which was my first report as EU Justice Commissioner, was published in July of last year, and it speaks for itself. And while it is often criticised, I would defend it strongly by making the point that it represents the Commission's objective and independent assessment of the rule of law situation in every member state of the EU. And it's not dreamt up by officials sitting in the Parliament or in DG Just. It is the result of extensive engagement that we have with all actors in the political system and actors outside of the political system as well, including civil society, media organisations, the judicial stakeholders, including prosecutors and the judicial authorities. In relation to Spain and the Council for the Judiciary, first of all, we have welcomed the fact that it was renewed in 2024, and we recognise that that took a considerable effort and represents important progress because it allows for senior appointments to proceed. That said, we have made a recommendation in the 2025 report, and we will take stock of that now in the coming weeks as we finalise the report for 2026. And the essence of it relates to the judges members of the Council for the Judiciary and the issue that, in our view, in line with the recommendations of the Venice Commission and in line with European standards, it is important that the judges members are peer elected as such. And so we continue to engage with the Spanish government and the Spanish authorities. It is an important part of the overall system of justice. And what we will now do is take stock of the current state of play, and right up to early July, when we finalise the report, there will be an opportunity for us to take note of any progress of plans for further reforms in this area, because it is something that we recognise is important in the context of Venice Commission recommendations. We know that the Venice Commission has made recommendations in respect of, they've given opinion in respect of two options that the Council for the Judiciary had submitted. So the dialogue continues, and we're now in a process of considering the state of play in the context of the Rule of Law report.
Sí, pero, comisario, ¿qué más reformas van a proponer?
More broadly, or in respect of that, more broadly?
Sí, no, respecto al Poder Judicial, nos acaba de decir que van a proponer más reformas. ¿Qué más reformas podrían proponer respecto al Poder Judicial?
So if you look at the 2025 report on the rule of law and the Spain country chapter, the key recommendation in relation to the judiciary relates to the Council for the Judiciary and the manner of the appointment of the judges members of that council. And so that is the issue which was the subject of examination by the European Commission last year in the report, and which we concluded should form part of the recommendation. So we will look at that, but we do not preclude the possibility of additional recommendations in the area of judiciary, but we have not arrived at that point yet because our evaluation is continuing. But there are other recommendations in the report that are also important. And I should make the broad point that we issue recommendations for every country. And I always emphasize the importance of member states embracing the process, seeing it as an opportunity, because there is extensive experience and expertise within the European Commission because of the fact that we are dealing with rule of law, the rule of law environment in all 27 member states and also in the candidate countries. So there's a vast wealth of experience and knowledge in the European Commission. And I always make the point that instead of viewing the rule of law engagement as being adversarial, it should be viewed as an opportunity to learn from best practice, to adopt European standards, and to improve the overall rule of law environment. That's a point I make broadly in every member state because it's one I passionately believe in.
Vale, comisario, para cerrar este asunto, pero para cerrarlo perfectamente bien y que todo el mundo lo tenga claro, negro sobre blanco. Es decir, la Comisión le sigue recomendando a España que al menos 12 jueces del Consejo General del Poder Judicial sean nombrados por jueces, no por el Parlamento. Es así, ¿no?
So until we issue a new report, then the recommendation from 2025 stands. We acknowledge that a majority of the members of the Council for the Judiciary are judges. That is positive, so that is a good thing. And the question that we have been examining and indeed making a recommendation on is the manner of the election of the judges' members. And that is the recommendations that we have made in the context of the Rule of Law report. But then we have to take account of ongoing developments, and we will do that in the coming weeks before reaching a conclusion in the 2026 chapter. But for now, the 25 report is the most up-to-date and it remains valid today.
Vale. Comisario, otro asunto de rabiosa actualidad, si me permite el tópico en España. La semana pasada conocimos el auto de preprocesamiento de la esposa del presidente del gobierno, de Begoña Gómez. Esto desató algunas críticas muy duras por parte de algunos ministros, especialmente del ministro de Justicia. ¿A usted le parece razonable que ministros de un gobierno, especialmente el ministro de Justicia, critiquen un auto judicial?
Well, first of all, as you would expect, we don't comment on individual cases. It's a matter for the public authorities to follow due process and to deal with cases accordingly. I think it's important that all actors in the political system and across the state work together in full recognition of the crucial principle of separation of powers between the executive, the judiciary, and indeed the legislature. Nobody is above criticism, and everybody has to be held accountable in respect of the important work that they do. But it is important fundamentally that the general public can have confidence and trust that the different arms of the state, the different arms with different sets of responsibilities, are respectful of the independence of each other and their respective roles. And I think we all have to work towards that. It's an important principle of democracy and of the functioning of a democratic state. So, it's a matter for individual actors what commentary or criticisms or points they wish to make. But I would make that overall broad point that while nobody is beyond criticism and being held accountable, it's important that important principle of separation of powers between the different arms of the state is respected, because I think that does lend itself to a well-functioning democratic system where we have appropriate checks and balances in place that can act as a constraint and a watchdog on the different parts.
Ya, pero tengo que insistirle, tengo que preguntarle, comisario, ¿usted cree que en algún momento ha fallado ese respeto por la división de poderes en España?
Well, again, we are in the middle of our evaluation of the rule of law situation in Spain, as we are for the other 26 member states of the EU, and indeed 4 of the candidate countries as well. And so hundreds of meetings take place in the lead up to us finalising the rule of law report. And we engage very closely with other services across the Commission, of course, with the President and her team, with the Secretary General. But the engine of this work is indeed in DG Just. And we look at a number of pillars every year in Spain and in the other member states, including the environment for tackling corruption, in particular high-level corruption. We look at the role of the media. Is there a free, independent and pluralistic media sector? What is the health and vibrancy of civil society? What is the independence of the judiciary? That's a very important measure in any member state. And also the broader checks and balances that should be operating to ensure the normal functioning of a democratic system. So we look at these in the round, and then we make the recommendations every year. And as you know, we are now making a proposal in the context of the next EU budget, where we do wish to build a closer link between the rule of law report and recommendations that we make on the one hand, and also access to EU funds, because we think it's important that rule of law, particularly where recommendations are of a binding or mandatory nature, are linked to the availability of EU funding.
Sí. Ahora vamos a hablar de la corrupción un momento, comisario, pero antes tengo que preguntarle, porque en España desde hace ya algunos años hay un gran debate sobre si existe o no existe lawfare. Le tengo que preguntar directamente, ¿a su juicio en España hay lawfare?
What do you mean by lawfare?
Lawfare, guerra judicial, es decir, que los jueces entran en guerra con los políticos.
Okay. I understand. I understand the point. I think it's very difficult for me to pass a general judgment on that issue. I mean, I engage on a regular basis with all of the stakeholders in Spanish politics, as I am required to do, those in government, those in opposition. I do so in an even-handed and impartial manner, and in member states, and I come from a political background, remember, so I understand the sometimes fractious nature and adversarial nature of politics in member states. But it's important when it comes to the conduct of politics on the one hand, and the execution of justice, that we do maintain that mutual respect and that separation, because the roles are quite distinct and separate as they need to be to ensure that the justice system remains fully at arm's length and independent. Because it goes back to the point, Javier, that I made in my remarks. It's not only important for individual citizens to have trust and confidence in the justice system, but at a time when we are trying to make the EU economy more competitive, if there isn't confidence among investors and among the business community that the rule of law is being fully respected, and that in Spain and in every other member state of the EU, that it doesn't matter where they come from, if an issue of conflict arises, if there is a breach of contract or there is commercial litigation, they have to believe that they will get a fair hearing before the court of law. And remember, every court in Spain, every court in Ireland is also an EU court, and is applying EU law as well as national law. And the first port of call when it comes to achieving justice begins at a local or a national court in the member state concerned. And that's why it is important that EU standards are upheld. But it is also why we are now embarking on a very ambitious judicial training strategy, and also why we are supporting member states in their digitalisation of justice agenda, because it's so important that EU law is consistently applied in every court within every member state of the European Union. Not every matter of EU law has to go to the Court of Justice. They should be decided at a local level, and that's why we are investing in training and investing in digitalisation and supporting the work of the member states in that respect.
Bien. Vale. Comisario, pues dos últimas Dos últimas cosas y ya le dejo tranquilo, que sé que no es fácil alguna de las cosas que le he planteado. La penúltima, estamos también en España en medio de un juicio por presunta corrupción relacionada con un ex ministro de Transportes. No le voy a pedir que me valore el caso concreto, pero sí si España está haciendo esfuerzos suficientes para luchar contra la corrupción, entre otras cosas porque todavía no hemos presentado la estrategia nacional contra la corrupción como nos ha pedido la Comisión Europea.
So this is an important issue that we look at every year in respect of each of the member states, because the ability and the execution of tackling high-level corruption is a fundamental part of the rule of law environment. And if you look at the recommendations in respect of Spain that we made last year, we did address, for example, the length of time that certain proceedings can take in the area of corruption. We felt that that was worth highlighting. We also highlighted, by way of a specific recommendation, the issue of lobbying and the need for reform in that area, and the need for a public register of lobbying, for example. And we also highlighted the importance of asset declarations, for example, in respect of people in senior public roles. So we have made recommendations that are relevant to the issue of how corruption arises and indeed is prosecuted in the context of Spain. And what I will be doing later on today when I meet with the Justice Minister, what my team are doing on an ongoing basis in the lead up to the adoption of the 2026 report, is to hear what progress, if any, has been made on these issues. It's important we engage and we provide that opportunity. What we are doing more broadly then as an EU, working with the co-legislators, thankfully late last year, we reached agreement on the anti-corruption directive, the revision of that directive, which achieves a greater level of harmonisation of what offences are deemed to be corruption offences across the entirety of the EU. So that's a very important agreement, and Spain was supportive of our efforts in that regard. And we will later on this year be presenting an anti-corruption strategy, and I know that the Spanish authorities will be very much feeding into that as well.
Bueno, y la última, comisario. Estamos a la espera de que el Tribunal Superior de Justicia de la Unión Europea se pronuncie sobre las consideraciones prejudiciales presentadas a la ley de amnistía aprobada el año pasado. Usted, como comisario de Justicia, ¿tiene algo que decir respecto a la ley de amnistía?
Well, I have to be very careful where matters are before the Court of Justice, as you know, because we have to, as the executive body of the European Union, whose responsibility is to act as the guardian of the treaties, we have to respect the legal order within the European Union, respect, of course, the primacy of EU law and the unique adjudication role at the apex of the EU legal order of the Court of Justice. And so when matters are before the Court of Justice, it is the well-established convention and the practice that we don't comment on them. Once they have issued their judgments, there may well be public policy issues that arise at an EU level or indeed for the member state. But until that point in time, we do have to await the judgment of the Court of Justice.
Lo entiendo, comisario. Hemos cumplido escrupulosamente el tiempo. Le dije que terminábamos a las 10 y son las 10 menos 2 minutos. Le agradezco muchísimo que haya estado con nosotros y de verdad se lo digo porque sé que algunas de las cuestiones no eran fáciles. Gracias, comisario. Un placer. Gracias a todos.
Despedimos esta entrega de los desayunos informativos de Europa Press invitando a todos nuestros oyentes a descubrir el resto de episodios de este programa, así como los distintos podcasts de nuestra red a través de europapress.es/podcast. Recuerda que puedes encontrar el catálogo sonoro de nuestra agencia al completo en todas las plataformas.